Haley Dawson, and we're here with Books and Beer. We're glad to have back in our studio Jay Palmer, author of Jeremy Wrecker, Pirate of Land and Sea, and we'll interview him right after this look at his new book. Jay Palmer, what are wreckers?
Wreckers are land pirates. Very few people know about them, but there are actually many sea shanties that were written in the 15th and 16th century about how everybody hates wreckers. Sea pirates would sail on their ships to go and find victims to attack. Land pirates would draw them into a deadly ambush. They would move signal fires at night so the ships would wreck on the reefs, and the entire clan is standing there with muskets waiting for the sailors to come sloshing up out of the sea. Or they would send out phony treasure maps and lure ships to an ambush point where they would have cannons ringing the bay and just sink the ship and slaughter everyone. They couldn't allow anyone to get out because if anybody ever found out they were there, the Royal Navy would come after them because everybody hated wreckers. Well, Jeremy is very excited because he's on his first trip away from the family, and he and his brother and his uncle are on their way to a distant port city to seed another one of these phony treasure maps to lure a ship to their ambush point. Only they get caught and shanghaied aboard a seafaring pirate ship. And the pirates are excited because they've got a treasure map, but they want to know where it came from and how these people came into possession of it. Now, if they tell them that they're wreckers, of course, the pirates will kill them because everybody hates wreckers. But if they don't, eventually the pirates will solve the clues on the treasure map and sail Jeremy, his uncle, and his brother into their own family's death trap.
So it sounds like wreckers were bad people, but you made them into heroes?
Well, hero and villain, it's an odd question when you're a writer because every hero and every villain ever written all comes from the mind of the author. We are both the heroes and the villains of our stories. Yes, wreckers were criminals, there's no question about that. But Jeremy was raised believing in his way of life, in his family's occupation, that this was the way that God wanted them to live. So even though he has a lot to unlearn on his adventure, he does come across with a beginning moral compass that totally accepts his way of life and the death and slaughter that he's very proud of doing, because every wrecker is very proud to slay one sailor per shot.
How much research did you have to do for Jeremy Wrecker?
I do a ton of research for all my books. Jeremy Wrecker, I wrote in front of a cutaway drawing that was done in the 16th century of a British man-of-war, so that I could get every spar and every mast line exactly named correctly, so that I could get the stairs and every cabin in the ship. That's very important to me, that everything be as accurate as humanly possible. I did tons of research in the vocabulary that pirates use, to put it very mildly. The clothing types that they wore, the style of muskets that they shot, and how they were loaded. These type of things, I think, come across because even in a book like Jeremy Wrecker, which is appropriate for young adults, it's written about the level of Treasure Island, but it has a lot of adult history and facts that, every reader would really enjoy.
Where do you find ideas for such diverse books?
I find that observing and really trying to understand each person in their situation helps you become a better writer.
Once you have an idea, how do you approach the actual writing of it?
The idea for a story often comes from the world. That's the thing I try to focus on the most. I love my characters, I love writing them, but the world itself has to be unique. It has to be as real as any of the characters. It has to have its own nature, it has to have its own subculture, its own background. The way I could write a story about life in Hogwarts 50 years before Harry Potter showed up, and everybody would recognize it, because the story itself the world that the story exists in would exist even if you took the main characters out and wrote it about somebody totally different. And that is the first thing I look at, is getting the world right, and then I put an interesting character into an interesting scene where the character has a problem. Of course, the character is going to try to solve that problem. Unfortunately, in the real world, most solutions create more problems eventually. And so you have more problems going on. You take it to where someone's life is either going to end or completely change. And then you end the book. That's called the plot arc. When most people describe a book, what they're describing is the plot arc. And that is how I try to approach a book, by creating the world, putting interesting characters in it. After that, my characters take over, and I have no clue. I am powerless as to what they're going to do and what they're going to say.
Well, thanks for being here today, Jay Palmer. This is Haley Dawson, and this has been another episode of Books and Beer. Good night.
Wow.